All right, so you ready to take a deep dive with me into this whole Buddhist idea of insight?
Always ready for a deep dive, especially into something as fascinating as this.
Yeah, and we get a lot of requests for this kind of thing, like people really wanting to understand not just what it is, but how it can lead to like a more peaceful life.
Absolutely. It's one thing to read about it in a book, but it's another to actually apply it to your life.
Totally. So to help us unpack all of this, we're going to be looking at some excerpts from a book called Pasted Text.
Okay, pasted text. Interesting. Where do we even begin with something as big as insight?
Right. Well, I guess the best place to start is with like the basics. What is insight in this context?
Well, the book uses the Pali term vipassana, which basically translates to clear seeing.
Clear seeing. Okay.
Yeah, it's all about seeing the true nature of things, specifically their impermanent nature.
So kind of like seeing through the illusions, like realizing that even the things we think are solid and lasting are actually like constantly changing.
Exactly. Think about it this way. Even your mood, it changes throughout the day, right? Influenced by things as simple as, I don't know, the weather or a conversation you had.
Oh, absolutely.
That's impermanence in action. And, recognizing that is a key part of developing insight.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how that kind of clear seeing could lead to a more peaceful life. If you're not constantly getting swept away by every little change. But where does tranquility fit into all of this?
Oh, that's a great question. The book really emphasizes that both insight, the vipassana we were just talking about, and tranquility, which is known as samatha in Pali, are essential for real progress on the path to awakening.
So it's not just about like zoning out and achieving this like super calm state.
Not exactly. I mean, think of it like this. Tranquility is like calming the waters of a lake, right? So you can see clearly to the bottom. But insight is what allows you to actually understand what you're seeing down there. The rocks, the fish, the way the light plays on the surface.
Ooh, I like that analogy. So how do we actually cultivate this clear seeing? How do we develop insight?
Well, the book goes into a core practice, mindfulness of breathing.
Mindfulness of breathing. Okay.
Yeah, but here's the thing. It's not just about finding a moment of Zen. It's actually a really powerful method for cultivating insight.
Hold on, wait. The classic meditation technique everyone's heard of, how does simply focusing on your breath lead to these profound insights about like the nature of reality?
Well, mindfulness of breathing actually involves 16 steps. And get this, the instructions themselves start to cultivate insight from the very beginning.
Okay, now you got me intrigued. Tell me more about these 16 steps.
All right, so for instance, the instructions, they encourage you to be sensitive to like the sensations of your breath and to notice how those sensations are always changing.
Okay.
That right there points to the impermanence we were just talking about, right?
Right.
It helps you start to see that all your experiences, both physical and mental, they're constantly in flux.
So by paying close attention to something as simple as my breath, I'm actually training my mind to see the impermanence in like everything.
You got it. And as you become more sensitive to those subtle changes, you naturally start to calm down.
Okay.
That's where the tranquility comes in.
I see.
And it allows for even deeper insight.
So it's like this positive feedback loop. Like the more you observe, the calmer you become, and the calmer you become, the more clearly you see.
Precisely. Now, these ideas, they're rooted in the ancient Buddhist scriptures called the suttas.
The suttas, right?
Yeah, for example, MN 118, AN 10.20, and SN 36.1 all highlight this connection between mindfulness of breathing and the development of insight.
So this isn't just some like new age idea.
Yeah.
This is coming from the core of Buddhist teachings.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting. The book talks about the concentration trap.
The concentration trap.
Yeah, you see, a lot of people meditate to find peace and quiet. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But, and this is key, concentration itself is still a fabrication. Oh.
It's still subject to change, just like everything else. And the book argues that getting attached to even like blissful states of concentration can actually hold us back on the path to true liberation.
So even those amazing feelings of peace and tranquility we might experience during meditation, those aren't the ultimate goal.
Right. Imagine building an incredible sandcastle on the beach.
Yeah.
Intricate, beautiful, everything you ever wanted.
Okay, yeah.
But eventually, the tide comes in.
And washes it all away. Ouch, I get it.
Right. So even those blissful states we might achieve through concentration, they're temporary and ultimately not what we should be clinging to.
So how do we escape this concentration trap? What's the alternative?
Well, the book outlines a 5-step approach for cultivating dispassion, even towards those pleasurable states of concentration.
5 steps.
And it starts with recognizing how those states arise and disappear.
So step 1 is really just observing that full cycle, not just getting caught up in the pleasant parts. Exactly. And then steps 3 and 4 involve recognizing the allure of those fabrications, the pleasure, the joy they bring, but also acknowledging their drawbacks, the fact that they're fleeting, that they will inevitably change.
Okay, so it's like consciously weighing the pros and cons.
Yeah.
The pleasure versus the inevitable suffering that comes with, clinging to anything temporary.
Yeah.
What's the 5th and final step?
The 5th step is the escape, the ultimate goal. Dispassion.
Dispassion.
And to understand how that works, we need to dive into a concept called dependent co-arising.
Okay, I think we need to unpack that one. What exactly is dependent co-arising, and how does it help us cultivate this dispassion?
So dependent co-arising, it's basically a way of understanding that everything arises in dependence upon other things, like a giant web of cause and effect.
A web of cause and effect, okay.
Think about how your mood can be affected by something as simple as the weather, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That's dependent origination in action.
So instead of seeing things as like happening randomly or because of some, inherent self that's in control, we start to see these connections between everything.
Exactly. And the book points out that this shift in perspective from a personal self-centered view to a more impersonal understanding of how things arise and disappear, it's crucial for developing dispassion.
I could see how that could work. Like if you realize that even your own feelings and thoughts are a result of countless causes and conditions, it becomes harder to cling to them as me or mine.
That's a great insight. And the Buddha himself actually emphasized this point by refusing to answer questions about who is experiencing things.
Really?
Oh, yeah. For instance, in some of the suttas, specifically SN 12.1 and SN 12.35, he avoids getting caught up in questions like who feels, who craves, who suffers.
So he's redirecting our attention away from that idea of a separate, permanent self altogether.
Precisely. The idea is that by seeing things in terms of this dependent co-arising, we start to loosen the grip of that, that self-concept, which is often the root of our clinging and suffering.
So dependent co-arising, it helps us see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Recognize the interconnectedness of everything, and ultimately become less attached to our own individual experiences.
You got it. It's a powerful framework for developing genuine dispassion, even towards those blissful states of concentration we were talking about earlier.
Okay, so we've talked about the 5 steps for cultivating dispassion, but we haven't really dug into how those last 3 steps, recognizing the allure, the drawbacks, and the escape, how those actually work together.
That's a great point. Let's use an example, okay? Imagine you're looking at a delicious piece of cake.
Cake. Okay, I'm with you.
That initial attraction, the desire to eat it and enjoy the taste, that's the allure. Step 3.
So recognizing that allure is about being honest with ourselves about how enticing those fabrications can be.
Exactly. But then comes step 4, recognizing the drawbacks. You might start to think, well, this cake is delicious, but it's also full of sugar and fat. Eating too much won't be good for my health,
Right.
And even if I enjoy this piece, the pleasure will fade and I'll just want more.
So you're consciously contrasting that initial attraction with the potential downsides, the inevitable suffering that comes with, clinging to that desire for cake.
Precisely. And that leads to the 5th step, the escape, which is dispassion. By seeing both the allure and the drawbacks, you start to loosen the grip of that craving. Maybe you decide to have a smaller piece of cake, or maybe you choose something healthier altogether.
So dispassion doesn't necessarily mean rejecting pleasurable experiences altogether. It's more about making wise choices based on, a clear understanding of both the benefits and the downsides.
Exactly. The book actually mentions 3 specific perceptions that help us cultivate this kind of dispassion: inconstancy, stress, and not self.
Okay, let's break down those 3 perceptions. What do they actually mean in practice?
All right, so inconstancy reminds us that everything is in constant flux, nothing stays the same.
Yeah.
You might notice inconstancy when your favorite food doesn't taste as good as you remember, or when a relationship changes over time.
Cool.
Stress highlights the inherent unsatisfactoriness of clinging to things that are impermanent. You might experience this when you cling to a certain outcome in your work and then things don't go according to plan.
Makes sense.
And not self points to the idea that we shouldn't cling to anything as me or mine, because ultimately there's no permanent, unchanging self to be found.
Well, these are some pretty powerful concepts to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
How do these perceptions actually work together to cultivate dispassion?
Well, they work together by helping us see things more clearly without the filters of our, usual assumptions and desires.
Okay.
To illustrate this, the book shares a questionnaire from one of the suttas, specifically SN 22.59. It goes like this. Are fabrications constant? The answer, of course, is no. Is that which is inconstant stressful?
Yes, because clinging to something that is always changing will inevitably lead to disappointment.
Right.
And finally, is it fitting to cling to something inconstant and stressful as me or mine?
The logical answer is no.
Exactly. The point isn't necessarily to conclude that there's no self at all, but rather to realize that it's not fitting to cling to these temporary, ever-changing things as me or mine. And by weakening that clinging, we naturally create space for more peace and freedom in our lives.
This is making a lot of sense. It's like we're shifting our perspective from, this is mine and I need to hold on to it, to this is just how things are right now and that's okay.
You're getting it. And the book even teases us with a list of 6 rewards that come from cultivating these 3 perceptions and establishing this sense of dispassion.
Oh, 6 rewards.
You can find those listed in AN6, 102, 104.
Okay, a little homework assignment. But hold on, there's something that's been bugging me throughout this whole discussion. Okay.
If insight itself is a mental process, isn't it also a fabrication? Wouldn't that mean that even the tool we're using to, free ourselves could become a trap?
That's a brilliant question, and it leads us to the next level of understanding in our exploration of insight.
Okay.
The book argues that, yes, even our insights and perceptions are ultimately fabrications, subject to change and impermanence.
Wait, so even the things that are supposed to help me wake up can become sources of clinging? This is getting seriously meta.
It is, but that realization is actually a profound step forward, and it's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive. So it's true, even the tools we use for, greater understanding, like insight, can become something we cling to, but realizing that is, that's a huge step forward.
So how do we work with that? It seems kind of, almost paradoxical, right?
Yeah.
We need insight to free ourselves, but then we have to let go of even insight itself.
It is a paradox, yeah, and the book explores this in detail. The key is to remember the purpose of insight. It's atha, which is liberation. We use it to see things clearly, and then we let go.
Okay, so it's not about holding on to insights like there's some kind of trophy or a badge of, enlightenment. It's more about using them to wake up and then just continuing on the journey.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. It's like using a flashlight to find your way out of a dark cave. The flashlight is incredibly helpful while you're in the cave, but once you're out in the sunlight...
You don't need to keep carrying it around.
Right, that would be silly. You'd just be weighed down by something that's no longer serving its purpose.
Exactly.
The book uses some powerful similes to illustrate this point. For example, MN22 and SN 35.197 talk about a raft that you use to cross a river. Once you reach the other shore, you don't carry the raft on your back, do you?
Definitely not. You leave it behind and enjoy being on solid ground again.
Another simile, this one found in MN24, talks about relay chariots used to reach a distant destination.
Relay chariots, okay.
You appreciate the chariots for getting you there, but you don't mistake the chariots for the palace itself.
So we need to recognize that the tools we use, even powerful ones like insight, are just that. Tools. They're not the end goal.
Absolutely. And AN 4.194 takes this idea even further. It describes a meditator who cultivates dispassion not only towards things that cause passion, but also towards the things that lead to liberation.
Whoa, that sounds like the ultimate level of letting go.
Yeah.
Even releasing attachment to the very things that, helped us become free.
It is. And SN 48.34 reminds us that this process of letting go, it's ongoing. It says that even stream enterers, those who have attained the first stage of awakening, they have seen the drawbacks of and the escape from discernment itself.
So it's not like you reach a certain level of understanding and then you're done. There's always more to see, more to let go of.
Precisely. The path is one of continuous refinement. And to illustrate this, the book shares a fascinating story about a wealthy householder named Anathapindika, who was also a stream enterer.
Story time. I always love a good Buddhist parable. What happened with Anathapindika?
Well, the story, which can be found in AM 10.93, tells us that he was having a discussion with some sectarians who were debating their various views, like on the cosmos, the self, the fate of an awakened being, all that stuff.
Sound like a pretty lively debate. What was Anathaptik's perspective on all of this?
He took a really clever approach. Instead of getting caught up in the content of their views, he focused on their performance, like what their beliefs led them to do.
So he was looking at the practical consequences of their beliefs rather than getting lost in, the philosophical arguments themselves.
Exactly. He pointed out that by clinging to any view, regardless of its content, they were clinging to stress. You see, he saw those views as mental fabrications, which, by their very nature, are impermanent and cause suffering if we cling to them.
That's brilliant. He's basically sidestepping the whole debate by pointing out the inherent flaw in clinging to any view too tightly.
He did, and when they pressed him for his own view, you know what he gave them.
What?
A classic Buddhist response. Whatever has been brought into being is fabricated, willed, dependently co-arisen. That is inconstant. Whatever is inconstant is stress. Whatever is stress is not me, is not what I am, is not myself.
So he's acknowledging the reality of fabrications, but he's not identifying with them as, self.
Precisely. But of course, the sectarians, being, clever debaters themselves, they try to trap him with his own logic.
Oh, I bet. What do they say?
They said, aha, you too are clinging to the idea that stress is not self. You're still clinging.
Ooh, I bet he had a good comeback for that.
Why? Anathapika's response is, it's the heart of this story. He said, Venerable sirs, whatever has been brought into being is fabricated, willed, dependently co-arisen. That is inconstant. Whatever is inconstant is stress. Whatever is stress is not me, is not what I am, is not myself. Having seen this well with white discernment as it has come to be, I also discern the higher escape from it as it has come to be.
Mic drop. He basically showed them that even the view of stress is not self, which is, it's a very helpful view on the path, right?
Yeah.
It's ultimately something to be seen through and let go of.
Exactly. He had already moved beyond clinging to even that insight.
He demonstrated that deeper level of understanding, the ability to use insight without getting attached to it. It's like he climbed a ladder to get a better view, and then once he saw clearly, he let go of the ladder and stepped into the open air.
That's a great analogy, yeah.
This story's amazing. It's like a master class on how to use insight skillfully without, getting tracked by it.
It is, and the book cleverly connects this story back to the fourth tetrad of breath meditation, as described in MN 118.
Remind me, what does that tetrad focus on again?
It's all about recognizing inconstancy, cultivating dispassion, experiencing cessation, and ultimately relinquishing even the act of insight.
So it's a step-by-step process of letting go, starting with simple observations of impermanence and culminating in the complete release of even the tools we use to get there.
Precisely. Anthapatika's story embodies this process beautifully. He used his understanding of impermanence and not self to free himself from clinging to any view, even those that are helpful on the path.
This whole deep dive it's really shifting my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
We started by exploring the basics of insight and how it can lead to a more peaceful life. But now we're seeing that there's even more to it than that. It was like peeling back layers of an onion, and each layer reveals a deeper understanding.
That's a great way to describe it.
Yeah.
And it can feel a bit disorienting at times, right? It's like, wait, even the things that are supposed to help me wake up can become traps.
Exactly. But it's also exciting because it points to the vastness of this path, the fact that there's always more to discover.
Absolutely. It's a journey of continuous learning and letting go, which ultimately leads to, greater freedom and peace. But it's important to remember that we don't have to figure it all out on our own.
That's reassuring. So what can we rely on when things start to feel confusing or overwhelming on this path of insight and letting go?
Well, we have the teachings of the Buddha as preserved in the suttas. We also have the guidance of, experienced teachers and practitioners who have walked this path before us. And most importantly, we have our own experience.
Our own experience? What do you mean by that?
I mean that each of us has the ability to observe our own minds, to see how these concepts play out in our own lives. We can notice when we're clinging to insights, when we're getting caught in the concentration trap, when we're identifying with our thoughts and feelings as me or mine. And by paying attention to those patterns, we can start to make more skillful choices that lead to greater freedom.
So it's about cultivating a sense of self-awareness, noticing those habits of mind, and gently guiding ourselves back to a place of I don't know, clarity and balance.
Exactly. It's a process of learning and growing, and it's something we can practice every day, both on and off the meditation cushion.
This has been an incredible journey so far, and we've covered so much ground. We explore the power of insight, the importance of balancing it with tranquility, and the paradoxical nature of letting go of even those helpful views and practices. But I'm curious, where do we go from here? How do we actually put all of this into practice in our daily lives?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Like, we've been exploring all these profound ideas about insight, dependent origination, letting go, but how does all of this actually, translate into real life change? How do we actually live with more wisdom and freedom?
Well, it's a great question, and I think the book offers some really practical guidance on this. It kind of comes down to recognizing that this path of insight, it isn't just about, formal meditation. It's about bringing that same quality of awareness to every aspect of our lives.
So it's about being mindful, not just when we're sitting on a cushion, but also when we're interacting with our families, dealing with work stress, even just scrolling through social media. Exactly. Remember those 3 perceptions we talked about earlier? Inconstancy, stress, and not self.
Yeah.
Those can be incredibly helpful tools for navigating, the ups and downs of everyday life.
Okay, yeah, I can see how those will come in handy. Can you give me some examples of how we might actually apply those perceptions in real life situations?
Sure, absolutely. Let's say you're stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
And you feel that familiar frustration rising up.
Oh, yeah. I know that feeling well.
You might notice the tightness in your chest, the impatience in your thoughts. That's an opportunity to remember inconstancy. This traffic jam, it won't last forever. It's just a temporary condition.
Right. So instead of getting all worked up about something I can't control, I can just remind myself that it's going to change eventually.
Exactly. And you can also use the perception of stress to kind of investigate those feelings of frustration. Like, why is this traffic jam bothering me so much? What am I clinging to that's causing me to suffer?
Maybe I'm clinging to the idea that I should be somewhere else by now, that I shouldn't have to deal with this, inconvenience.
And that brings in the perception of not self. Who is this I that's so bothered by the traffic? Is it really a solid, unchanging self? Or is it just a collection of thoughts, feelings, and sensations that are, kind of just arising and passing away in this moment?
This is blowing my mind a little. I never thought about applying those perceptions to something as mundane as a traffic jam.
But that's the beauty of this path. It's not just about abstract philosophy. It's about finding freedom and peace in the midst of, everyday experience.
So it's about training ourselves to see things differently, to respond to challenges with more wisdom and less reactivity. Mm-hmm. But how do we actually train our minds to do that? It sounds like a pretty tall order.
It does. But the good news is we already have all the tools we need. Mindfulness of breathing, the practice we discussed earlier, is a really powerful way to cultivate those qualities of attention and awareness.
Right. So it's not just about calming down during meditation. It's about developing a quality of mind that we can then bring to the rest of our lives.
Exactly. And the more we practice bringing that mindful awareness to our daily activities, the more natural it becomes to see things through the lens of those 3 perceptions.
So it becomes less about forcing ourselves to think in a certain way and more about just, developing a new way of seeing that kind of rises spontaneously.
Precisely. It's it's like learning to ride a bike. At first, it takes a lot of effort and concentration, but eventually it becomes effortless, almost second nature.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Buddhist insight, what's the key message you want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
I think the most important takeaway is that this path to liberation, it really is available to each of us right here, right now. It's not about becoming some kind of, superhuman or achieving some distant goal. It's about cultivating a new way of seeing, a new way of being in the world that allows for more peace, freedom, and joy.
It's like we've been handed a treasure map, and the treasure is buried right in our own backyards.
That's a beautiful way to put it. The book ends with a powerful reminder that the true nature of reality, this unfabricated, unconditioned state of liberation, it's always present, always available to us. It's just a matter of learning to see it.
And that learning process, that can be a lifelong adventure filled with challenges, insights, and ultimately a deep sense of fulfillment.
Exactly. It's a journey worth taking.
This has been such an incredible exploration of insight and how it can really transform our lives. We started with the basics, dove into some pretty profound concepts like dependent origination and the concentration trap, and we even explored some practical ways to bring these teachings into our everyday experience.
It's been a joy to share these ideas with you and with our listeners.
And for those of you listening, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, challenged your assumptions, and maybe even inspired you to take a deeper look at your own experience.
Remember, the path of insight is always open to you, and the more you explore, the more you'll discover the boundless freedom and peace that lie within.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the heart of Buddhist wisdom. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.